What if a single act of kindness, repeated week after week without expectation, could shatter your entire life and rebuild it into something unrecognizable? For Bella Monroe, that question wasn't hypothetical. It was a detonation waiting to happen. The story began in a place most people drove past without a second glance. The Millstone Diner, a squat little roadside joint just outside Wichita Falls, Texas. The building sagged slightly to the left, like it had given up on standing straight years ago. The neon sign out front flickered between open and darkness, buzzing with the effort of staying alive. Inside, the booths were covered in mustard-colored vinyl that had cracked and peeled in 100 places, patched over with duct tape that never quite matched. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of burnt coffee, fryer grease, and something sweet and artificial that clung to everything like a film. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even clean by most standards. But it was honest work, and for Bella Monroe, honest work was all she had left. She moved through the diner with the practiced efficiency of someone who had walked the same path 10,000 times. Refill the coffee, clear the plates, smile even when her feet screamed and her back ached. She was 34 years old, though some days she felt twice that. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days, and her uniform, a faded blue dress with a white apron, hung loose on a frame that had grown thinner over the years. Not from discipline, from survival. Every morning, Bella woke up to the same suffocating reality. A stack of medical bills from her father's final months, a landlord who called twice a week, and a dream of nursing school that felt further away with every shift she worked. She wasn't drowning. She was treading water in an ocean with no shore in sight. And yet, every Friday morning at 8:10 a.m., when the bell above the door chimed and an elderly man shuffled in, Bella smiled. A real smile. His name was Arthur. Bella Monroe wasn't supposed to end up here. Once she had been a college student with a biology textbook under one arm and a stethoscope dream in her heart. She'd wanted to be a nurse, not for the prestige, but because she understood what it felt like to sit in a hospital room, holding someone's hand while the machines beeped their mechanical lullabies. Her father had spent his final 6 months in one of those rooms, and Bella had been there for every labored breath, every whispered memory, every moment of fear disguised as courage. When he died, he left her 2 things: a box of old photographs and $47,000 in medical debt. Nursing school became a ghost. The dream didn't die. It just moved further and further into the distance, like headlights disappearing down a long highway at night. Now, she was a single mother to a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, a bright-eyed girl who still believed her mom could do anything. Sophie didn't know that some nights, Bella sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of overdue bills, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. She didn't know that her mother sometimes skipped lunch so Sophie could have new sneakers. She didn't know that the reason they hadn't gone to the movies in 8 months wasn't because Bella was too busy. It was because $12 felt like a fortune. The Millstone Diner paid $9.75 an hour plus tips. On a good week, Bella walked away with $420. On a bad week, $310. Rent was $850. The math was brutal and unforgiving. But Bella showed up every day because that's what you did when someone depended on you. And every Friday at 8:10 a.m., Arthur arrived. He was somewhere in his late 70s, though he carried himself like a man who had forgotten how to be old. His back was straight, his steps deliberate, though his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee cup. He wore simple clothes, pressed khaki slacks, a button-down shirt in muted blues or grays, and a wool cardigan that looked older than Bella. His face was weathered, lined with the kind of deep creases that come from decades of squinting into the sun or carrying weight no one else could see. Arthur never smiled, but he wasn't unkind. He always sat in the same booth, second from the back, right side facing the door. He always ordered the same meal: 2 slices of dry toast, 1 scrambled egg, and black coffee. No butter, no jam, no substitutions. He ate slowly, methodically, cutting his toast into precise squares with a knife that seemed too elegant for a place like this. The knife had a silver handle, engraved with initials Bella couldn't quite make out from a distance. He rarely spoke beyond good morning and thank you. But Bella noticed things about him. Small things. The way his cufflinks, plain gold, but with an inscription she couldn't read, caught the light when he reached for the sugar dispenser he never used. The way he carried a fountain pen in his shirt pocket, a sleek black thing with a gold clip that looked like it cost more than her car. The way his watch, thin, elegant, with a leather band that had been polished smooth by time, sat quietly on his wrist, never drawing attention but always present. Arthur didn't look like he belonged in the Millstone diner, but he came back every week. The first time his wallet went missing, Bella didn't hesitate. It was a Friday morning 3 years ago. Arthur had finished his meal and reached into his jacket pocket. His expression shifted, just slightly, from calm to confused. He patted his other pockets, checked the seat beside him. His hands moved a little faster, the tremor more pronounced. "Everything okay?" Bella had asked, coffee pot in hand. Arthur looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "I seem to have misplaced my wallet." Bella glanced at the check on the table. $6.47. She smiled. "Don't worry about it. It's on me." Arthur started to protest, but Bella waved him off. "Seriously, it happens. You've been coming here for months. Consider it a thank you for being such a great customer." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to understand why someone would do that. Then he nodded once slowly. "Thank you, Bella." The next Friday, he came back, wallet intact. He paid his check and left a $20 tip on a $6 meal. But 2 weeks later, it happened again, and then again a month after that. Bella never said a word. She just covered it. Her co-workers noticed. Sal the cook, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with tattooed forearms and a voice like gravel, leaned through the kitchen window one afternoon and shook his head. "You know that old man's playing you, right?" Bella didn't look up from wiping down the counter. "He's not playing anyone. He forgets his wallet every other week, Bella. That's not forgetfulness. That's a hustle." Brenda, the other waitress, sharp-tongued, bleach blonde, and perpetually exhausted, snorted from the corner booth where she was rolling silverware. "Sal's right. You're too nice for your own good, hon. That man's probably got more money than all of us combined, and you're out here paying his tabs like some kind of charity." Bella finally looked up. "He reminds me of my dad." That shut them both up, because they knew. They knew about the hospital bills. They knew about Sophie. They knew that Bella Monroe was barely holding it together, and yet here she was, spending money she didn't have on a stranger who never asked for help. Brenda softened. "You got a heart too big for this world, Bella." Sal just muttered something under his breath and went back to the grill. But they loved her for it. Everyone did. Arthur never explained why his wallet kept disappearing. He never offered elaborate thanks or emotional speeches. But every time Bella covered his check, he would meet her eyes and say the same thing. "Not all debts are money, Bella." She never fully understood what he meant, but something about the way he said it, quiet, deliberate, like a man sharing a secret he'd carried for decades, made her believe it mattered. She just didn't know how much. The Friday it happened, Bella knew something was wrong before she even looked at the clock. It was 8:10 a.m. The bell above the door hadn't chimed. Arthur's booth sat empty, the morning light slanting across the cracked vinyl like it was waiting for someone who would never arrive. Bella told herself he was just late. Traffic, maybe. A doctor's appointment. Something ordinary and explainable. By 8:30, she was glancing at the door every 30 seconds. By 9 o'clock, the knot in her stomach had tightened into something cold and sharp. Sal noticed. He always noticed. "Your Friday guy's a no-show, huh?" Bella wiped down the same section of counter for the third time. "He'll come." But he didn't. The lunch rush came and went. The afternoon dragged on with the usual parade of truckers, retirees, and road-weary travelers who barely looked up from their phones. Bella moved through her shift on autopilot, refilling coffee and clearing plates. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Arthur had never missed a Friday, not once in 3 years. By the time her shift ended at 4 p.m., Bella's anxiety had grown teeth. She sat in her car in the parking lot, engine running, staring at her phone. It felt ridiculous. She didn't even have Arthur's number. She didn't know his last name. She didn't know where he lived, or if he had family, or if he was lying in a hospital bed, somewhere wondering why no one had come to check on him. But she couldn't just do nothing. She drove to the nearest hospital first, Wichita Falls General. The woman at the front desk looked at her with the kind of tired patience reserved for people asking questions they already knew wouldn't have answers. Do you have a last name? No. Date of birth? I don't know. He's in his late 70s, maybe early 80s. The woman's expression said it all. Ma'am, without more information, I can't help you. Bella tried 2 more hospitals, then 3 nursing homes. Each time, the same response. No one matching Arthur's description had been admitted. No one knew who she was talking about. By the time she picked Sophie up from her after-school program, Bella's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Mommy, you okay? Sophie asked from the back seat, clutching her backpack. Bella forced a smile into the rearview mirror. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a long day. But she wasn't fine. She felt like she'd lost something she didn't know she had until it was gone. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation she'd ever had with Arthur. Every quiet thank you. Every unreadable expression. Every time he'd said, "Not all debts are money, Bella." What if something had happened to him? What if he'd been alone when it did? The thought made her chest ache. She didn't sleep. The next evening, Saturday, just after 6 p.m., Bella was wiping down tables at the diner when she heard the sound that would change everything. The low, rumbling purr of an expensive engine. She glanced out the window and froze. A sleek black Lincoln Continental had pulled into the parking lot, followed by 2 more identical vehicles. The kind of cars that didn't belong on a dusty roadside in Wichita Falls. The kind of cars that belonged to people who had security details and offshore accounts and lawyers on speed dial. Bella's pulse quickened. The first car door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, mid-50s, with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than Bella's monthly rent. Her expression was unreadable, sharp, composed. The face of someone who had delivered bad news before and knew how to do it without flinching. Behind her, 4 men in dark suits emerged from a second car. Bodyguards. They moved with a kind of silent efficiency that made Bella's stomach drop. From the third car came 5 more people, 3 men and 2 women, all carrying leather briefcases and wearing the same polished professional armor. Attorneys. The bell above the door chimed. The diner went silent. Every head turned. Sal stopped mid-flip on the grill. Brenda's jaw went slack. Even the 2 truckers in the corner booth put down their forks. The woman in the charcoal suit walked directly to Bella, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown. Bella Monroe? Her voice was firm-clipped, but not unkind. Bella's throat went dry. Yes. The woman extended a hand. My name is Margaret Hale. I'm Arthur Hale's daughter. The world tilted. Arthur Hale. Bella shook her hand on instinct, though her brain was still trying to catch up. Is he okay? I've been trying to find him. He didn't come last Friday, and I didn't know how to. He passed away, Margaret said quietly. The words hit Bella like a fist to the chest. The air left her lungs. Her vision blurred at the edges. I'm sorry, Margaret continued, her tone softening just slightly. He had a stroke. It was quick. He didn't suffer. Bella couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. All she could think about was Arthur sitting in his booth, cutting his toast into perfect squares, his hands trembling just slightly, his voice low and steady. Not all debts are money, Bella. Margaret reached into her briefcase and pulled out a large envelope, sealed with red wax and embossed with gold lettering. She placed it on the table between them. My father left instructions, Margaret said. Very specific instructions. This is for you. Bella stared at the envelope like it might explode. I don't understand. Open it. The diner was so quiet Bella could hear her own heartbeat. She picked up the envelope with shaking hands, broke the seal, and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Legal documents. The kind with dense paragraphs and official stamps and words like bequeath and executor. At the top of the first page, in bold, unmistakable letters. Bella's eyes scanned the page, but the words swam together. She had to read the same sentence 3 times before it landed. To Bella Monroe for her kindness, compassion, and humanity, I bequeath the sum of $250,000. The page slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. $250,000. She couldn't process it. It didn't make sense. Arthur was just an old man who ordered toast and eggs. He forgot his wallet. He needed help. He wasn't. Margaret picked up the page and handed it back to her. Keep reading. Bella's hands trembled as she turned to the second page. In addition, I bequeath to Bella Monroe a controlling share, 51%, of the Millstone Diner property in business, valued at approximately $5 million. The room spun. $5 million. Bella's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the table, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Sal's voice broke through the silence. Holy shit. Brenda was standing now, hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Bella looked up at Margaret, her voice barely a whisper. This can't be real. Margaret's expression remained steady. It's real. My father was the founder of Hale Industries, one of the largest construction and real estate development companies in the country. He was worth approximately $9 million at the time of his death. $9 million. Bella felt like she was going to be sick. He came here every week, Margaret continued, because this place reminded him of something he'd lost a long time ago. And you, she paused, her voice softening. You reminded him of what kindness looks like when it's given without expectation. Bella's vision blurred. Tears streamed down her face before she even realized she was crying. He couldn't have meant me, she whispered, shaking her head. He couldn't have meant me, could he? Margaret reached out and gently placed a hand on Bella's shoulder. He did. By Monday morning, the entire town knew. The story spread like wildfire through Wichita Falls, whispered over grocery store aisles, debated in coffee shops, dissected on local Facebook groups with the kind of fervor usually reserved for high school football scandals. A waitress at the Millstone Diner had inherited millions from a mysterious old man. Some versions claimed it was 10 million. Others said 20. One particularly creative rumor suggested Arthur had been a retired mob boss laundering money through toast and eggs. The truth was strange enough without embellishment. By Tuesday, the news vans arrived. Bella stood behind the counter, watching through the grease-streaked window as reporters set up cameras in the parking lot. A woman in a red blazer practiced her stand-up, gesturing dramatically toward the diner's flickering neon sign. Another crew interviewed customers as they left, shoving microphones in their faces like they were witnesses to a crime. Local waitress inherits fortune. The cheer in red on the noon broadcast. Mystery millionaire leaves everything to the woman who paid for his meals. Bella wanted to disappear. She called in sick on Sunday, the first time in 3 years, because she couldn't face the questions, the stares, the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her like a collapsed ceiling. But by Monday, reality had dragged her back. Bills didn't stop. Sophie still needed to eat. And the diner, her diner now, apparently still needed someone to pour coffee and wipe down tables. Except now, every customer looked at her differently. Some smiled too wide, like they were hoping proximity to sudden wealth might rub off on them. Others whispered behind their hands, eyes narrowed with suspicion. A few asked outright, "So what are you going to do with all that money?" As if it were any of their business, as if Bella herself had any idea. Sal tried to lighten the mood. "You going to fire me now that you're the boss?" he joked, flipping pancakes with theatrical flair. Bella didn't laugh. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, Sal." Brenda leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What you're supposed to do is get yourself a good lawyer, hon, because people are going to come out of the woodwork now. Trust me." She was right. The first letter arrived on Wednesday, then 3 more on Thursday, all from law firms Bella had never heard of, all offering their services, all with the same underlying message. "You're in over your head. Let us handle this." Margaret had already assigned her a probate attorney, a composed woman named Rachel Kimball, who spoke in calm, measured tones and explained things like estate liquidity and tax implications in a way that made Bella's head spin. Rachel was competent, professional, and probably cost more per hour than Bella made in a week. But even Rachel couldn't prepare her for what came next. Caleb Hale arrived on Friday. Bella heard him before she saw him. The roar of a Tesla engine cutting through the morning quiet, followed by the slam of a car door that carried the weight of someone who believed the world owed them something. He strode through the diner entrance like he owned the place, which in his mind he probably did. Caleb Hale was 32 years old and looked like he'd been designed in a boardroom focus group. Tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt with no tie, collar open just enough to suggest casual confidence. Dark hair styled with a kind of precision that required a mirror and 15 minutes every morning. A Rolex that caught the light with every gesture. He had his grandfather's sharp jawline, but none of his quiet dignity. He stopped in the center of the diner and looked around with barely concealed disgust, as if the worn vinyl booths and chipped Formica counters were a personal insult. Bella was refilling the coffee station when he turned his gaze on her. Bella Monroe? His voice was smooth, polished, the kind of voice trained to command rooms full of people who made seven figures. She straightened. That's me. He didn't offer a handshake. I'm Caleb Hale, Arthur Hale's grandson. The diner went quiet again. Sal paused mid-scramble. Brenda stopped pouring syrup. Even the trucker in booth 3 lowered his newspaper. Bella met his eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. I appreciate that. I'm sure this has all been very overwhelming for you. There's something in his tone, a condescension disguised as sympathy, that made Bella's jaw tighten. It has been, she said carefully. I'm sure my grandfather meant well, Caleb continued, clasping his hands in front of him like a politician delivering bad news. He was a kind man, sometimes too kind, and in his later years his judgment became clouded. Bella's pulse quickened. What are you saying? Caleb's expression shifted, still polite, but with an edge now. I'm saying that my grandfather's will is being contested. My legal team has already filed the necessary paperwork. This inheritance, he gestured vaguely around the diner, was made under questionable circumstances. A man of his age and condition, leaving his estate to a stranger? It raises concerns, legal concerns. The words hit like a slap. Sal stepped out from behind the grill, spatula still in hand. You calling her a con artist? Caleb didn't even glance at him. I'm calling this what it is. An elderly man manipulated by someone who saw an opportunity. Bella's hands curled into fists. Her voice came out low and steady. I never asked your grandfather for anything. Didn't you? Caleb tilted his head. You paid for his meals, built a relationship, made him feel indebted. That's textbook undue influence. Get out, Bella said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Get out. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that someone like her would dare push back. Then the mask returned. This isn't over, he said quietly. My family built an empire. I'm not going to let some waitress steal it, because she knew how to smile at the right moment. He turned and walked out, the bell above the door chiming mockingly behind him. Bella stood frozen, heart hammering, hands shaking. Brenda broke the silence. That guy's a real piece of work. Sal nodded. You want me to slash his tires? Despite everything. Bella almost laughed. Almost. The legal war began in earnest. Depositions, interrogatories, motions to dismiss. Caleb's attorneys were expensive, aggressive, and relentless. They painted Bella as an opportunist who had manipulated a vulnerable old man. They questioned her character, her motives, her financial desperation. They dug into her past, her father's medical bills, her student loan debt, her struggle to make rent, and weaponized it. She needed money. He had money. She saw an opportunity and took it. Rachel fought back, but even she admitted the battle would be long and ugly. Caleb has resources, Rachel explained during one of their meetings. He's going to drag this out, hoping you'll settle or give up. Bella sat across from her in a conference room that smelled like leather and intimidation. I'm not giving up. Good, Rachel said, because there's something you need to understand. Arthur didn't just leave you money and a diner. He left you leverage. She slid a folder across the table. Bella opened it and stared at the documents inside. Corporate filings, shareholder agreements, property deeds. The Millstone Diner isn't just a diner, Rachel explained. It's owned by a holding company, Millstone Properties, LLC, which is a subsidiary of Hale Industries. When Arthur gave you controlling interest in the diner, he gave you a stake in a larger company. Bella's head spun. I don't understand. You're not just a waitress anymore, Bella. You're a corporate stakeholder. You have voting rights. You have a seat at the table. A seat at the table. In a company worth $9 million. It didn't feel real. It felt like a mistake, like someone had handed her a script for a life that belonged to someone else. That evening, Margaret Hale showed up at Bella's apartment unannounced. Bella opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, still dressed in that same impeccable suit, but with something softer in her expression now. "Can I come in?" Bella hesitated, then stepped aside. Margaret sat on the worn couch in Bella's tiny living room, looking out of place among the mismatched furniture and Sophie's scattered toys. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. "My father didn't do this on a whim," she said quietly. "He thought about it for years, planned it carefully. He knew Caleb would fight. He expected it." Bella sank into the chair across from her. "Why me? I don't understand why he chose me." Margaret's eyes softened. "Do you know about Eleanor?" Bella shook her head. "Eleanor was my mother," Margaret said. "She died 30 years ago. Car accident. My father was driving. A truck ran a red light, hit them head on. She didn't survive. He did." Bella's chest tightened. "My mother was a lot like you," Margaret continued. "Kind, generous. She saw people, really saw them, when the rest of the world looked past them. My father spent the rest of his life trying to honor that. He built his company, made his fortune, but he was never the same. He carried guilt like a second skin." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "When he started coming to your diner, he told me he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever. He said you reminded him of her, not in looks but in spirit. The way you treated him with dignity. The way you paid for his meals without making him feel small. He said it was the first time in decades he'd felt like a human being instead of a checkbook." Tears slid down Bella's face. "He wanted you to have this," Margaret said, "because he believed you'd do something good with it. Something Eleanor would have done." Bella wiped her eyes. "Caleb's going to take it all away. Not if you fight. I don't know how to fight people like him." Margaret leaned forward. "Then, learn." The threat came 2 days later. A letter, delivered by courier, signed by Caleb's lead attorney. "Cease operations at Millstone Diner immediately, or face legal action for breach of corporate governance." He was trying to close the diner, her diner, the place that had kept her alive for 3 years. Bella read the letter twice, hands trembling with rage. Then she picked up the phone and called Rachel. "I'm not backing down," Bella said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. Rachel's response was immediate. "Good. Then let's go to war." The notebook was hidden behind the old cash register, tucked into a gap between the wall and the wooden counter that no one had cleaned in probably a decade. Bella found it by accident. She'd been searching for the diner's original property deed. Rachel needed it for the legal proceedings, and had pulled the ancient register away from the wall, releasing a cloud of dust and the faint smell of mildew. Behind it, wedged into the narrow space, was a leather-bound notebook, its cover worn smooth by time and touch. On the front, in elegant handwriting that she recognized immediately, were 5 words, "For the one who never asked." Bella's breath caught. She carried the notebook to Arthur's booth, always his booth, and sat down in the exact spot where he'd sat every Friday for 3 years. Her hands trembled as she opened the cover. The first page was dated 4 years ago, before she'd ever met him. "I have decided to return to the Millstone Diner. Margaret thinks I'm being foolish, a man of my position eating in a place like that. But she doesn't understand. Eleanor and I stopped there once, 40 years ago, on our way to Houston. She ordered pancakes and talked to the waitress like they were old friends. That was Eleanor. She made everyone feel seen. I went back today. The diner has changed. The waitress has changed, but the feeling hasn't. I sat in the same booth. I ordered toast and eggs, though what I really wanted was to remember what it felt like to be ordinary." Bella turned the page, her heart pounding. The new waitress, Bella. Her name tag says, "Smiled at me today." Not the kind of smile people give when they want something. A real smile. The kind Eleanor used to give strangers. I don't know why that matters, but it does. She kept reading, entry after entry, week after week. Arthur had been watching her, not in a creepy way, in the way a broken man watches someone who still believes the world can be kind. "Bella, cover my check again today." I pretended to forget my wallet, though of course I didn't forget. I wanted to see what she would do. She paid without hesitation, without resentment. I asked her why, and she said I reminded her of her father. I wonder if she knows how rare that kind of heart is. I learned today that Bella is drowning in debt. Medical bills from her father's death. She works double shifts and still can't keep up. And yet she keeps paying for my meals. It would be easy to call her foolish, but I think she's the smartest person I've met in 30 years. She understands something most people forget. Kindness is an investment that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Bella's vision blurred. Tears dripped onto the pages, smudging the ink slightly. I've decided what I'm going to do. Margaret will be furious. Caleb will contest it. But I don't care. For the first time since Eleanor died, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Not building another skyscraper or closing another deal. Something real. This diner, this small, broken, beautiful place, is where I remembered what it feels like to be human. And Bella is the one who reminded me. She deserves more than survival. She deserves a chance. The next entries detailed his plan. How he'd restructured his assets. How he'd quietly purchased the diner property through a shell company and folded it into his estate. How he'd written his will with surgical precision, knowing Caleb would fight, but believing Bella was strong enough to win. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before he died. I won't be here much longer. I can feel it. The way my hands shake more than they used to. The way my thoughts drift like smoke. But I'm not afraid. I've made my peace. Eleanor would be proud of what I'm leaving behind. Not the money, the choice. Bella doesn't know it yet, but she's about to face a battle. Caleb will come for her. He'll try to crush her. He's my blood, but he's nothing like me. He's everything I tried not to become. Entitled, cruel, hollow. If you're reading this, Bella, it means I'm gone. And it means you're wondering why. Here's the answer. Because you never asked. Because you gave without keeping score. Because in a world that taught me to measure everything in dollars, you reminded me that some things can't be bought. Fight for this. Not because I told you to, but because you deserve it. And because kindness, real, stubborn, unreasonable kindness, is the only thing worth leaving behind. Not all debts are money, Bella. Some are paid in trust, in dignity, in the belief that one person can still make a difference. Make them remember that. The notebook slipped from Bella's hands and landed on the table. She sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 mornings, and sobbed. Not from grief, from understanding. Arthur hadn't just given her money. He'd given her a mission. That night, Bella couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction she'd ever had with Arthur. Every quiet thank you. Every trembling hand reaching for a coffee cup. Every time he'd looked at her like she was more than just a waitress. He'd been testing her, not cruelly, gently, the way a teacher tests the student they believe in. And she'd passed without even knowing there was a test. But now the real exam was coming. Caleb, the courtroom, the boardroom, a world she didn't understand, filled with people who would see her as an imposter, a threat, a mistake. How was she supposed to fight that? The answer came 2 days later, in the form of a phone call from a man named William Davies. Ms. Monroe, my name is William Davies. I was Arthur Hale's personal attorney for 37 years. I understand you're in need of guidance. His voice was warm, grandfatherly, with a kind of calm authority that made you believe everything would be okay even when it wasn't. They met at a small law office in downtown Wichita Falls. William Davies was in his 70s, with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a three-piece suit that had gone out of style 2 decades ago, but somehow still looked dignified. His office smelled like old books and leather, and the walls were lined with framed photographs. Arthur at various stages of his life, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons, standing beside Eleanor. Arthur spoke of you often, Mr. Davies said, pouring her a cup of tea she didn't ask for. He said you had something most people spend their whole lives searching for. What's that? Bella asked. Integrity. She didn't know what to say to that. Mr. Davies sat across from her, hands folded. Caleb is going to try to intimidate you. He's going to use legal jargon, corporate policies, procedural motions, anything to make you feel small and out of place. That's his strategy. He wants you to surrender before the fight even begins. I'm not surrendering, Bella said quietly. Good. Mr. Davies smiled. Then let me teach you how to win. Over the next 3 weeks, William Davies became Bella's mentor, guide, and unlikely champion. He taught her the language of corporate governance, terms like fiduciary duty, shareholder derivative actions, proxy voting. He explained how boardrooms worked, how decisions were made, how power was wielded not through volume, but through procedure. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room, he told her one afternoon as they reviewed Hale Industries bylaws. You need to be the most prepared. He walked her through Arthur's financial empire. Hale Industries wasn't just construction. It was commercial real estate, residential development, infrastructure contracts. Arthur had built it from nothing, one project at a time, over 40 years. And now a piece of it belonged to her. You own 51% of Millstone Properties, which holds a 12% stake in Hale Industries, Mr. Davies explained, pointing to a corporate structure chart that looked like a family tree designed by an accountant. That makes you a significant minority shareholder, not enough to control the company, but enough to influence major decisions. Bella stared at the chart. I don't know anything about construction or real estate. You don't need to, Mr. Davies said. You know about people. You know about fairness. You know about doing the right thing even when it costs you. That's what Arthur valued. That's what this company needs. He taught her how to read financial statements, how to spot inconsistencies, how to ask the kind of questions that made executives squirm. He showed her Arthur's old strategy notes, decades of business philosophy distilled into simple principles. Profit without purpose is just greed. Treat your workers like family, and they'll build you an empire. The best deals are the ones where everyone walks away better than they arrived. Arthur had been a different kind of businessman, not ruthless, not cutthroat, but successful anyway. Caleb doesn't understand that, Mr. Davies said. He thinks business is war. Arthur knew it was construction. You build something that lasts. Slowly, Bella began to see the shape of the battle ahead. It wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about philosophy, about what kind of company Hale Industries would become. Caleb wanted an empire. Arthur had wanted a legacy. And somehow, Bella had been chosen to protect it. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Bella spent every spare moment preparing. She read Arthur's old letters. She studied Hale Industries' project history. She memorized the bylaws, the voting procedures, the names and faces of every board member. At night, after Sophie went to bed, she practiced her presentation in front of the bathroom mirror. Her voice shook at first. She stumbled over words. She felt ridiculous. But slowly something shifted. She started to believe she belonged there. Not because she had a business degree or a corporate pedigree, but because Arthur had believed in her. And if a man who built a $9 million empire from nothing thought she was worth betting on, maybe she was. Margaret called her one evening, her voice cautious. How are you holding up? I'm terrified, Bella admitted. Good, Margaret said. That means you're taking it seriously. My father used to say fear is just respect for the stakes. It means you understand what you're fighting for. What if I lose? Then you lose with dignity. But I don't think you will. Caleb underestimates you. That's his weakness. He sees a waitress. He doesn't see what my father saw. What did he see? Margaret paused. Someone who still believes kindness matters. Someone who hasn't been broken by the world yet. Someone who might actually change things. When Bella hung up, she walked over to Arthur's notebook, still sitting on her kitchen table. She opened it to the last page and read his final words again. Make them remember that. She would. The boardroom was waiting. And this time, Bella Monroe wasn't going to run. The Hale Industries headquarters stood 43 stories above downtown Dallas, a monument of glass and steel that reflected the Texas sky like a mirror designed to intimidate. Bella stood on the sidewalk below, staring up at it, her reflection small and distorted in the building's polished facade. Her hands were clammy. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. This was it. Margaret stood beside her, dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, her expression unreadable. You ready? Bella wanted to say no. She wanted to get back in the car and drive home to Wichita Falls, back to the diner where she understood the rules and knew her place. But she thought of Arthur, of his trembling hands cutting toast into perfect squares, of his quiet voice saying, "Not all debts are money, Bella." She thought of Sophie, watching her mom get ready that morning, asking, "Are you going to win today, Mommy?" And she thought of Eleanor, a woman she'd never met but whose kindness had somehow traveled through decades to land in Bella's hands. "I'm ready," Bella said. They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in silence. The doors opened onto a lobby of polished marble and recessed lighting, where a receptionist with a practiced smile directed them down a long hallway lined with portraits of men in suits who all looked vaguely the same. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors, already open. The boardroom. Bella stepped inside and felt the weight of a dozen stairs land on her at once. The room was massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table made of dark mahogany that could seat 30 people, leather chairs that probably cost more than her car. Everything was designed to make you feel small, replaceable, temporary. Around the table sat the board members of Hale Industries, 11 men and 3 women, most in their 50s or 60s, all dressed in the kind of expensive business attire that announced they belonged here. Their expressions ranged from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. And at the head of the table in the chairman's seat sat Caleb Hale. He looked even more polished than before. Navy suit pressed to perfection, hair styled with precision, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He watched Bella enter like a predator watching prey wander into a clearing. "Ms. Monroe," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "So glad you could join us." Bella took her seat at the far end of the table, directly across from him. Margaret sat beside her. Mr. Davies settled in on her other side, his presence a quiet reassurance. Caleb leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Before we begin, I think it's important we all understand the situation. My grandfather, in his declining years, made certain questionable decisions regarding his estate. Decisions that, frankly, don't reflect the values this company was built on." Several board members nodded. "This company was built by my grandfather's vision, his work ethic, his sacrifices," Caleb continued. "And while I'm sure Ms. Monroe is a perfectly nice person," his tone made it clear he thought the opposite. "The idea that a waitress with no business experience, no education, and no understanding of our industry should have any say in how this company operates is quite frankly absurd." A few murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Bella's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "Not yet." Caleb smiled. "So let's be adults about this. Ms. Monroe, I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. $500,000. Cash. You sign away your claims to the diner, relinquish any stake in Hale Industries, and we all go our separate ways. No hard feelings." He said it like he was doing her a favor, like she should be grateful. Bella met his eyes. "No." The smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "I said no." Caleb's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Bella said quietly, "but it's my mistake to make." Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping to something colder. "You don't belong here. You're a waitress who got lucky because my grandfather had a moment of weakness. You think one act of kindness entitles you to a seat at this table? You think paying for a few meals makes you family." The room fell silent. Bella felt the eyes on her, judging, measuring, dismissing. For a moment doubt crept in. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Then she remembered Arthur's notebook. His final words, "Make them remember." She stood. The room shifted. Standing during a board meeting was a power move, assertive, commanding. Several board members exchanged glances. Bella's voice was steady. "You're right. I am a waitress. I don't have a business degree. I don't know how to read a prospectus or calculate ROI. I didn't grow up in boardrooms or country clubs." Caleb smirked, thinking he'd won. "But I knew your grandfather," Bella continued. "I knew him in a way you never did. I knew him as a man, not as a monument. And I know what he wanted." She pulled a document from her folder, a copy of Arthur's will, marked with highlighted sections. "Your grandfather didn't leave me his estate because I smiled at him," Bella said, her voice gaining strength. "He left it to me because he spent 3 years watching me, testing me, and he saw something you've spent your whole life forgetting." "And what's that?" Caleb sneered. "That business isn't about taking. It's about building. It's about treating people with dignity. It's about leaving something behind that matters more than your bank account." She turned to address the full board. "Arthur Hale built this company from nothing. He poured sweat and years and heartbreak into it. And when his wife died, when Eleanor died, he could have become bitter. He could have become ruthless. But he didn't. He built this company on a foundation of fairness. He paid his workers well. He honored his contracts. He treated people like they mattered. One of the older board members, a woman named Patricia Chin, was nodding slowly. Caleb wants you to believe I'm here to steal something, Bella continued. But I'm not. I'm here to protect it, to protect what Arthur built. Because if we let people like Caleb turn this company into just another machine that chews people up and spits them out, then Arthur's legacy dies. And everything he stood for, everything Eleanor stood for, becomes meaningless. She looked directly at Caleb. You think I don't belong here because I'm a waitress. But your grandfather was a construction worker before he was a CEO. He understood what it meant to struggle, to fight for every dollar, to choose kindness even when it cost him. Her voice broke slightly. He chose me because he knew I'd fight for the people you've forgotten about. The workers, the families, the ones who build your buildings and clean your offices and keep this company running while you sit in rooms like this and decide their worth. The room was silent. Bella placed the will on the table. Arthur's estate was structured very carefully. He knew you'd contest it, Caleb. He planned for it. And according to Section 12, Clause 4 of the shareholder agreement, any challenge to the will's provisions triggers an automatic review of corporate governance, including the chairman's conduct. Mr. Davies stood, his voice calm and precise. We've documented 17 instances over the past 2 years where Caleb Hale violated company ethics policies, misuse of corporate funds, harassment of employees, breach of fiduciary duty. He slid a thick folder across the table. Several board members reached for it immediately. Caleb's face went pale. Those are lies. They're documented, Mr. Davies said. Emails, expense reports, witness testimony. Arthur knew what you were doing. He just didn't have the heart to remove you himself. So he left the tools for someone else to do it. Patricia Chin opened the folder, scanned the first page, and looked up at Caleb with something between disgust and disappointment. Motion to remove Caleb Hale as chairman, she said quietly, pending full investigation. Second, another board member said immediately. Caleb shot to his feet. You can't, this is my company. It was never your company, Margaret said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady, sad. It was Dad's, and he chose to give it to someone who actually understood what it meant. The vote was called. One by one, hands went up around the table. 9 in favor, 2 abstentions, 0 against. Caleb Hale stared at the room in disbelief, his carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, might fight, might throw one last tantrum. But then something in him broke. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Before he left, he turned back one last time, his voice venomous. You'll fail, he spat. You have no idea what you're doing. Bella met his eyes. Maybe. But at least I'll fail trying to do the right thing. The door slammed behind him. The room exhaled. Patricia Chin stood and extended her hand to Bella. Welcome to the board, Ms. Monroe. 3 months later, the Millstone Diner reopened. The booths had been reupholstered, still mustard-colored. Because some things shouldn't change. The kitchen had new equipment. The neon sign had been repaired, glowing steady and bright for the first time in years. But the biggest change was the staff. Bella had implemented a new benefits program. Health insurance, paid sick leave, tuition assistance for anyone who wanted to go back to school. Sal got a raise. Brenda became assistant manager. And 3 new hires joined the team, all single parents who needed a second chance. On the wall behind the counter hung a bronze plaque, engraved with careful precision. Kindness is a currency. Spend it freely. Arthur James Hale. And in the second booth from back, right side, facing the door, a smaller plaque had been installed on the table, reserved in memory of Arthur Hale, a man who never forgot what mattered. The bell above the door chimed. Bella looked up from pouring coffee and smiled, a real smile, the kind Arthur used to notice, as a young family walked in, their daughter clutching a stuffed bear. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the bronze plaque and casting a warm glow across Arthur's booth. Bella set down the coffee pot and walked over to the booth. She ran her fingers across the smooth metal, remembering trembling hands and quiet thank yous and a voice that said, "Not all debts are money." She whispered, so softly no one else could hear, "For Arthur." And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in something more, she could have sworn she heard him whisper back, "Well done." There are moments in life when the world pivots on something so small. Most people miss entirely. A paid meal, a kind word, a gesture that costs almost nothing but means everything. Bella Monroe never set out to inherit a fortune. She never imagined that covering a $6 breakfast tab would lead to boardrooms and legal battles, and a legacy she didn't ask for, but learned to carry. She just saw an old man who needed help, and she helped him. That's it. That's the whole story, really. But somewhere in that simple act, repeated week after week, without recognition, without expectation, something extraordinary took root. Not magic, not luck, just the quiet, stubborn power of kindness refusing to calculate the return on investment. Arthur Hale spent his life building empires, making millions, shaking hands with powerful people. But in the end, what mattered most to him wasn't the buildings or the bank accounts. It was a waitress who saw him as human, who treated him with dignity when she had every reason not to, who gave freely when she had almost nothing to give. And that changed everything. Bella didn't just inherit Arthur's money. She inherited his belief that one person, one ordinary, struggling, determined person, could still make the world softer, kinder, more like Eleanor would have wanted it to be. The diner still stands today. The neon sign still glows against the Texas dusk, a beacon for travelers and locals alike. And every Friday morning, someone sits in Arthur's booth, a different person each week, and their meal is quietly, anonymously paid for. Because Bella understands now what Arthur spent a lifetime learning. Kindness is a currency that multiplies when you spend it. She fed a stranger not for reward, but because it was right. And kindness, stubborn, unreasonable, beautiful kindness, made its own miracle. If you believe that small acts can create great changes, that one moment of compassion can ripple across years and lives and legacies, then this story isn't just about Bella and Arthur. It's about all of us. Subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what we're capable of when we choose to see each other. Because the next miracle might start with you.